this also gets to exactly why we should have some trepidation around these. And let's go ahead and put this up there, please, on the screen about Belarus. Belarus is currently taking delivery of Russian nuclear weapons, forward deploying them much closer toward Ukraine. This is according to President Lukashenko himself, says the country has been taking delivery of the tactical nuclear weapons specifically, some of which he said, quote, were 3 times more powerful than the atomic bombs that the United States dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. The deployment is actually Moscow's first move of such warheads, tactical nuclear weapons that could potentially be used on the battlefield outside of Russia since the fall of the Soviet Union. So that is why, this was downplayed really in the Western press. They're like, oh, it hasn't had. It's like, no, this is the first time literally in 30-something years they've ever moved nukes outside of Russia. It's a direct response to what's going on in Ukraine.
Right.
They're moving them closer towards Ukraine. No, that doesn't mean they're going to use them. Yes, it does mean that, things would change significantly. But it also lets us return to something that we talked a lot about during the tactical nuclear weapon discussion, Krystal. There's no such thing as a tactical nuclear weapon.
Right.
Strategically, that escalates things to a whole other realm.
Yes.
And as Lukashenko himself said, even these, quote, tactical nukes that are, they won't annihilate, the entire globe in a single bomb, still 3 times more powerful than Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's where we're at. That's what quote unquote tactical means.
I think that's so important for people to understand, because you hear that term thrown around like, oh, it's just a little nuke. It's no big deal. It's like, no, we're talking about something that is extraordinarily powerful, dangerous, and puts us on a chain of escalation that nobody knows where it will ultimately go. I love the way that they downplay this, too. I mean, even in this piece, they say the U.S. has criticized Putin's decision, but said it has no intention of altering its own stance on strategic nuclear weapons, has not seen any signs that Russia is preparing to use a nuclear weapon. Like, don't you consider this a sign that they might be considering use of nuclear weapons? They go on to say the Russian step is nonetheless being watched closely by the U.S. and its allies, as well as by China, which has repeatedly cautioned against the use of nuclear weapons in the war in Ukraine. I do think that part is significant, but it also speaks to another lie that has been told in the press, which is that, like, oh, we keep shipping more advanced and longer range weapons, and the Russians, they don't respond, they don't escalate. So all these fears of, oh, they're going to escalate are overblown. What do you call this? I call this an escalation.
Yes,
I mean, I call a lot of what Russia has done an escalation, in returning to attacks on Kyiv, on drafting their own people and up in the ante in terms of this war. A lot of that, I think, could very clearly be called an escalation and is in part in response to the actions that we have ourselves taken here as a country. So, this is the whole ball game right here, ultimately. Will nukes ever be used in this conflict? Are we going to end up accidentally stumbling into World War III? The danger might be small. It might be, 1%. It might be 0.1%. If there is any risk of that at all, it should be the #1 thing that we're concerned about here and around the world.
Yeah, of course. And also the idea that NATO says that they're not worried is actually just completely wrong, because what just happened? Put this up there on the screen. Literally, the very same time that the Russians are moving nukes into Belarus, NATO just held its largest Air Force drill ever in history to demonstrate alliance capabilities and, quote, solidarity against Russia. The war games officially launched and are called the 2023 Air Defender Military Exercise, also included Finland, as well as many other countries, includes 12 days, 250 aircraft, 10,000 personnel, the largest deployment in the history of all of NATO, all that was happening such to make a very strong, message towards them. And actually, the funniest part to me, Krystal, is that if you look at the actual quotes of what they are saying is, the trigger for me was the capture and the annexation of Russia, and that since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine last year, NATO members' eastern flank want the assurance that they will defend it should the Kremlin turn its sights on them. That was the German general who was in charge of the exercise himself, and said, while he painted it, quotely, as purely defensive in nature, behind the scenes say that they hope it will show President Putin that the alliance is not backing down in its support for Ukraine as Kyiv begins its counteroffensive. So clearly, this is in response to Russian, not only the invasion of Ukraine, but also the deployment of these nuclear weapons and the increased fear that this could escalate into something. If they didn't have fear, then they wouldn't have the drill. The drill is quite literally being held as a response to what's going on right there. So So once again, you cannot say with a straight face that you are not worried about this escalating to anything. That's why we sent thousands of troops to NATO's eastern flank in the first place after this response, why we literally inducted two, or trying to induct, two new members, successfully inducted one into the alliance, and then now having this ongoing, air drill that's happening. And also literally at the same time you and I are talking, all NATO defense ministers are gathered right now in Brussels, hammering out more agreements, running over more types of exercises and things they can do. So it's not like strategically that things aren't moving and they aren't changing.
Yeah, I think the whole point of this is just to underscore for people, we can feel, it can feel a little bit like the frog in the boiling water. You just keep hearing this news over and over again, and increased escalation and the next step on the ladder. And now we're sending F-16s, and now, the largest war games in NATO history. And now we're talking about a timeline for Ukraine to enter NATO. And now Russia is moving nukes into Belarus. It can feel exhausting. It can be hard to hold on to that sense of alarm at where all of this is heading. But I think it's just really important for people to keep in the front of their minds what a dangerous, volatile, and unpredictable situation we continue to be in so long as this war continues.
Yeah, that's well said.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.